buying movie tickets,
economics.
going to restaurants.
Big question mark is the GBA going to do exactly the same thing?
I know there's a lot of kind of negativity about how we feel about Hong Kong. And I'm just looking at present company, and some of you I've known for a very long time. And if we regard ourselves as fellow travelers, and I'm now in my 60s, so I've traveled a little bit. And my journey actually began with, of course, my family, my parents. I know what they kind of went through. They were the war generation. My father's family came from Shanghai. My mother's family is a Cantonese, old Cantonese family. I know quite a bit about their background, how they got here, where they are now, what they think. I had the privilege of knowing my great-grandparents on my mother's side and my Shanghainese grandparents on my father's side. And I became interested in their journey and their history. So when I look at Hong Kong today, the first thing I want to say is I see it as a long history. I mean, I happen to be here at a moment in time, but I carry actually the family history. And of course, the family history is very much part of the modern history of China. Now, of course, Hong Kong is one of those places where our families and friends also dispersed. Hong Kong, they came here and then, they went elsewhere. Sometimes they came back, sometimes they stayed overseas. So again, the Hong Kong DNA is a mixed DNA because we have friends and families who are all over the place. Our children may be all over the place. Our parents may have moved off here and there. So what I really just want to emphasize as my first point is all these things I think are relevant to how we see ourselves and thinking about where we will go. So I've named my talk today, Hong Kong, Many Splendid Futures. And the reason I picked this is if we were to pick different moments in time in the last 170 years of Hong Kong's history, put your finger on any moment. And perhaps, like me, you might put your finger on a moment that related somewhat to your family and to your friends. What happened then? What did they live through? Now, the one that I definitely remembered, whilst I was quite small, but it was very dramatic, was the Cultural Revolution. And what were you doing then? What was influencing you? I saw a bomb go off in Central. I remember going home, my parents discussing that night whether they would leave Hong Kong, but they didn't. So what were some of those moments for you, right? And actually, as time went past, sometimes not much time, there was another period of something good, positive, and splendid. So I've been through some moments like that. That was 1989, there was 1984, there was 1997, there was the Asian financial crisis, SARS, right? What I'm saying is, all these periods that we have lived through, we survived them relatively well. So the future is how we all make choices. So that's what I'd like to share with you today. As we think about our society, because I've been teaching, and I've had the privilege to teach in the business school at UCLA for 5 years. My teaching stopped in 2023, but prior to that, I taught for 5 years. And the word development, as I was growing up, the word development was quite important, right? Because we talked about how Hong Kong was going to advance. How were we going to develop? In America, I found that Americans don't often use the word development. Now, of course, if you go to China, if you go to the rest of Asia and many other what we call the global south today, there's a lot of interest in development. What are we going to be? What are we going to do to make us advance as a society? So I'm very interested in this concept of development. And I think it's important for us even though we've become a wealthier society, to still think about how we're going to develop. And of course, what happened in 1997 was Hong Kong gained the country. We gained a very large country, a very diverse country, and this country is developing very, very rapidly. Many of its policies, its articulation, its narrative is about development. So I think in Hong Kong, let's also think about our development. And one of the issues about more advanced cities, because you've solved some basic problems of sanitation, education, all the basic stuff. In many ways, Hong Kong is quite well developed as a city, and we are interested in livability. How can we live better here? And what does living better mean for Hong Kong? So I want to run through very quickly some reflection about who we are, the people of Hong Kong, how we live in Hong Kong today, what we went through, and let's then think about possible futures. So here is who we are. If you're in the older generation, if we're looking at our parents' generation, most people were born in China. If you're looking at the young generation, most of them were born in Hong Kong. And I guess, depending on who you are, we're somewhere in between. But just to bear this in mind, who we are. These are periods of our history that I think people would remember, and you can put your marker on, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, depending on where you were born. And I think because we live moments, they become most intense for us because we lived it ourselves. Our memory are deepest for periods that we went through ourselves. So I've highlighted several periods that I think the Hong Kong memory, the Hong Kong DNA, it's helped to mark the Hong Kong DNA. I had a friend who lived in one of those squatter huts in Causeway Bay. I don't know whether any of you had actually remember, if you were around then, that whether you'd been to a squatter area. But that wasn't so long ago. And then I'm kind of looking at public housing, right? The Lei Jiang estate. And then, of course, Tai Gu Sing, a private estate, very famous, is still there. And I suspect for those of you who've been around a bit longer, you remember those periods. Those periods represented something about the development of Hong Kong. And then on your right, I want you to see On Da Chun. This is one of the newest public housing development in Hong Kong. It's fantastic. And I remember telling Paul Chan when he was a secretary for development and I was in government, I said, Paul, I want to live in public housing. I said, it's unfortunate that I don't qualify. But actually, if you look at how they're built, they're really good. They're much better than many of the private housing. All right, where do we live in Hong Kong? How many of you live on Hong Kong Island? Can you put your hand up? Well, quite a few, right? We're in the significant minority. Look at where Hong Kong people are living. So, society has been changing. And as we think about going forward, right, the many splendid future, in many ways, we knew this kind of, there's this movement towards the mainland because there's more and more activities where Hong Kong joins the mainland. So one of the questions that I've kind of had interesting discussions with the property developers who have a lot of property on Hong Kong Island is, how do we envisage Hong Kong Island going forward? Is this the end? Where will we move our different centers of business, right? Will the financial center move away from here? What I'm saying is, these questions we can ask, but I think it's important for us to imagine. Imagine that, maybe Hong Kong Island would be the most desired area precisely because we have some more space. I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but what I'm saying is it's easy to kind of think of a question and say, oh, it's negative, it's bad. What do we think of mid-levels? I live on mid-levels. What we think of some of the very expensive property by the Victoria Harbour Front. Who will populate them? What will we use them for? Can we imagine a different way of living? Because actually the world is changing, technology is changing, people's expectations are changing. They don't all have to be negative. They could be very interesting and exciting. What kind of topography do we live in? Hong Kong is a very hilly place. Well, extreme density, what is that good for? Is anything good about extreme density? Well, the way I look at it is, if it works in Hong Kong, it works everywhere. So in a way, we're a great kind of pilot project for things to do with urbanization and density, public health, urban planning, urban design, redesign, retrofitting, right? This is the place. We have lots of green areas. And in more recent years, we've talked a lot about our country parks, how valuable they are. Because actually we've preserved quite a lot of it, they're not only important for the people of Hong Kong, they become a national asset. Because in China, the thinking today is about the importance of biodiversity, restoration, nature. Also, we're surrounded by sea. Again, oceans and seas and the living things in the ocean. These are all, again, more and more important. The other thing about Hong Kong is the way that we've had to build this city. We do have a lot of engineers. We have a lot of built environment professionals. We're great at extreme engineering. And if I think we allow our urban designers, our architects, to actually really truly allow them to imagine how they would redesign, retrofit this city. Can we raise the money to actually get all that done? We have the talent here to do that. Remarkably long-living people in Hong Kong. In the past, people used to say the oldest people are the ones in Japan. Well, from 2010, that's no longer the case. The people who live the longest are right here. That means if you live in Hong Kong, your chances of living longer is higher than if you live somewhere else. Now, you probably can't read this, so I'm going to read it for you. This was published in The Lancet, which is a well-known medical and health publication. Hong Kong's leading longevity is the result of fewer diseases of poverty while suppressing the diseases of affluence. A unique combination of economic prosperity and low levels of smoking with development contributed to this achievement. Let's look at this. These are all the reasons why people live longer here. Low maternal mortality, low infant mortality, low smoking rate, low alcohol consumption, low drug usage, low cancer rate, low obesity rate, low traffic accidents, highest daily walking, and we have a high sense of personal security. It's not a bad place. Not a bad place. You're all going to live longer because we live here. One of the issues, of course, we cannot escape from history. And one of our very long history that is deeply embedded in our DNA is our memory of the colonial period. We have certain nostalgia, of course, and it has affected our identity. When I was going through school, it was really important to learn English. It was also during that time, with the Cultural Revolution. And I remember my father, my Shanghainese father, saying to me, must have very good English, otherwise no future. Right? So it was really important. And for my parents and my grandparents' generation, If you knew English in a colonial society, you got a job, you got a better job. Right? So this sense of how to look at the world, and in many ways, we looked at the world through the eyes of a colonial Western society. We bought into a lot of the values that was a part of the West. Hong Kong was a place in the East that was quite Westernized, a place of the West kind of in the East. So very special, very, very special. And we are a late colonial product. Other countries that were colonies, they had experienced decolonization earlier in the 60s and the 70s. We didn't until the 1990s. And of course, we did not become independent. We reunited with China. So therefore, our, whatever is in your heart and in your cells about how you feel about China, what might have been handed down in those feelings from your parents, how you look at China today and going forward, these are very interesting feelings. I certainly have them, and I suspect you have them too. But they do have an impact on our identity, on how Hong Kong people look at themselves. I'll give you one example. I was teaching a course at HKUST, and I was talking about the history of the environment in China. So again, it was quite recent history. We're talking about history that started from the 1950s. And I mentioned a number of names. I said these are the fathers of the environmental movement. And the class, no one heard of their names. So I asked them, who have you heard about? Well, they heard about Al Gore, and they've heard about some younger American politicians, right? And, I told them, I said, well, actually, there are many other people, and, we should learn also a little bit about who have affected our own country, now that we have a country. So, as I said, these things are complex, but Hong Kong people have a lot to learn about their own country. All right, let's look at China's trajectory. And, you've seen this before, right, where I put out the Hong Kong trajectory, but I want you to focus the bit at the end. Because if I was talking to you a year ago, there was a lot of concern about a lot of people leaving Hong Kong. And if you go back to the newspaper at the time, they said we were depopulating because people were leaving Hong Kong. And you can imagine, yes, during the COVID period and so on. Actually, if you come to today, if you go back and have a look at census and statistics, we're at 7.9 million people. So population going up again. Now, I make this point only to say that for a city like Hong Kong, population tends to fluctuate. And we're not alone. This is Singapore. Now, I've only managed to find this up to 2020, but I bet you if I have 2021, 2022, 2023, you will see places like Singapore and Hong Kong, cities by nature that are international. People come in and out. Okay, here's California. People in California left, and they went to some other state in the US. People about Brexit, people come and go. So the point I'm not trying to make is, well, maybe I can put it positively. The point I'm trying to make is people come and go, especially today when people can come and go. Now, I'm not denying that talent from Hong Kong people have left Hong Kong. All I'm saying is Hong Kong people, talented Hong Kong people have been coming and going for a long time. So again, we don't need to see Hong Kong as having come to some end. So, but there are these narratives here. What do we mean when people say, well, Hong Kong is just another Chinese city? Or Hong Kong is more Chinese today. What does that really mean? Hong Kong is less international. Again, what does that really mean? Hong Kong is over. What does that really mean? I remember in the 70s, New Yorkers were telling me, New York is over. Anyway, okay, this saying that Hong Kong is just another Chinese city. That's an insult to Chinese cities. I mean, my God, look at these cities, right? You know, Chinese cities today are pretty good. And this is why Hong Kong needs to also keep investing in the fabric, soft and hard fabric of our city. Chinese cities today are pretty good. That's why you and I are going to Shenzhen. Not because it's cheap, but because it's good. Okay, now when we think about whether Hong Kong is less international, we need to think Asia. Who might be attracted by Hong Kong? There's a sense that perhaps people from North America and Europe, is it that they find Hong Kong less interesting? Now, the geopolitics is very complicated today, yes, but being international doesn't necessarily mean the global north. The world is a big place. One of the problems I found in the past is Hong Kong people were not interested in our own Southeast Asian neighborhood. And why is that? Because we used to think they're poor. And that's why there isn't very much we can learn from them. Well, today it's entirely different. If Hong Kong people still think they don't want to look at examples from Asia, if they still think they don't want to look at examples from the mainland, they're really behind. Those are not the people that will reimagine Hong Kong into many splendor things. So we have a lot to learn. Hong Kong has a lot to learn. So is Hong Kong still attractive to many people? Well, I think so. So Hong Kong will be different from before, but it doesn't mean Hong Kong is over. I just want to go into the last part of my talk by, showing you these things, right? This is 2022. I'm sure there's a 2023. But I want to share with you today why Hong Kong and many other great cities in Asia, in the global south, is never going to make it. So if you look at the cities that are always ranked the top in terms of livable cities, Vienna, Copenhagen, Zurich, Calgary, Vancouver, Geneva, Frankfurt, Toronto, Amsterdam, Osaka, Melbourne. Most of these are relatively small cities that have reached their full development shape and size. In Asia is entirely different. And how did they create the index to say where Hong Kong and other cities are? Category 1, about stability. I think Hong Kong ranks pretty high there. A category, healthcare. We've just said, right, we live the longest in Hong Kong. We should be way up there. Culture and environment. Look at what they have. Humidity and temperature, discomfort of climate for travelers. I mean, what are they really thinking? This rules out the entire tropics and subtropics. So what I'm saying is, these very often, when you look at how people put these indexes together, they do it for a particular purpose. They're not doing it for you and me, who are really living in Asia. Education, right? Categories, infrastructure, Hong Kong scores very high. But it's easy to score low, right? If people sort of get a feeling that Hong Kong is different and not so good as before. Okay, I just want to end with possible futures. How do we really look at the place we want to live in? How can we improve well-being in Hong Kong? There's lots of things we can do. Green and smart, this is what we have to be. All advanced cities, including the ones on the mainland, is going to be green and smart. The economy, of course, we need to beef up the economy. And of course, finance will continue to be important. And thank God we have a larger neighborhood. It's great that we can just take less than an hour and go to Shenzhen. What's wrong with that? We live in a big country. We gained a big country. They are advancing. I can do more stuff there. I can go to music shows there. I can go and visit museums there. And of course, the 1.4 billion people from the mainland can come to Hong Kong. I'm baffled by why some people would say, we only want the ones who can pay a lot of money and spend in Hong Kong. No, we're part of a country. We welcome everyone to Hong Kong. It's okay that the students come. It's okay that they don't have money. I traveled to their countries when I had no money. So, I mean, Hong Kong needs to be a place for all. Making physical things. Many Hong Kong companies that are members of the General Chamber and other chambers in Hong Kong are very good at making things. They may not be the world brand names, and yeah, generally they're not, but let's take clothing and textiles, because we all need to still wear clothes. There are about, what, a dozen companies in Hong Kong companies that make most things for the brand names in the world. They know how to make things. They're not making it right here, but they're assembling everything. They're doing it across the border and in Asia. They know how to solve these problems. They are great, great companies. They're just not the ones that everybody talks about every day. Maybe what Hong Kong should do is get to know the SMEs, get to know those different industries where we're really, really strong in. Talk to those people. They are the ones that are solving companies. When I was having my lunch, we were talking about the shipping sector. The shipping sector in Hong Kong is incredible. They have global influence. They have global business. Their ships don't come to Hong Kong. The government has just kind of twigged that they should be noticed because they're global players. So the industries that you and I don't know anything about yet, we should go and find out about them. And the good ones are operating globally. So reindustrialization, circular economy, green business models, this is what the future is about too. We have a whole bunch of companies here that could be leaders in this field because they're already being asked to solve these problems and they're global players. Lastly is, you know, all the stuff that we like, right? We want more art and culture. The government doesn't know how to be cool, but the private sector does, right? So let them be cool. Let them do certain things for Hong Kong. In a way, the government needs to downplay themselves and perhaps, you know, get the private sector, get the truly cooler people to come and do this. The younger, cooler people, the people who understand global taste. They're not in government, right? But it's okay, it's okay. They're not in other governments either. This is where we need to rely on ourselves. Nature and biodiversity, Hong Kong is incredible. And we need to invest in the digital because the dematerialized experiences is also what is important. That's what Macau is going to go into. What is Hong Kong going to do? So my last slide, strength and weaknesses, you know, and don't worry about what I say. This is just some blurb I've put there. You will have your own list of Hong Kong's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But there's no doubt in my mind there are many splendid things in the future for us. Thank you.
Please take a seat first. You've been standing for the last 30 minutes, so at your age of 60, you're still very strong, but good to, when you have a chair, you can sit down. Thank you for this very insightful. The buzzword from your 30 minutes is you have at least said 50 times, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. I think we need that to restore or regain the confidence of most of Hong Kong. Just like we talked over lunch, just now, the brief lunch. I think Hong Kong people is not that poor in many sense, both in terms of mentally and physically, in terms of physical assets and other things. But it seems that we do not have the kind of confidence that we used to have, whether the COVID have changed the behavior of us, or because the world becomes so complicated that our confidence level has to be sort of reignited in some aspects. When I look at your topic, the many splendid futures, I'm not sure whether this come from the movie that was made back in the 50s.
Of course.
The love is many splendid things.
Yes.
So, yes, exactly.
Yes.
That is Hong Kong, the kind of East and West interacting. There was no sort of geopolitical tensions. It's love, it's a Mediterranean thing. Americans met a lovely Hong Kong girl. Those who see one is not really accurate of Hong Kong. But that's the kind of history. You talk about memories, talk about history and all that. We'll be going back to that sort of 50s, even though we should not be reminiscing just the good old days. But that kind of more harmonious, having art as a way of connecting people, the best of East and West, lovely the tune. I forgot who was the original singer of that. Is it Matt Monroe or the?
No, I don't remember either.
But
we
I can Google it, but it's a lovely song.
I mean, if you go to the Foreign Correspondents Club, you will see as you go up the stairs that there is a big picture there of the house where it was shot in. That was my great-grandfather's house.
Wow.
So I feel very connected to that period of history. And my God, there was a lot of argument at the time or about other things. So I think all I'm saying is we all come from somewhere, right? I mean, our feelings today are shaped by many, many things and many generations. And Hong Kong has been through a lot. You know, many societies have been through a lot. And if we look at other places that are going through hard times, we're nowhere near that. We're actually pretty lucky. The other thing about Hong Kong is from, 1842, the colonial period, the early colonial period, it was about trade and commerce. And a lot of people made a lot of money in Hong Kong. And if we look at, if we were to ask who owns which buildings, they're not all owned by the big property developers. There's a lot of buildings in Hong Kong that are in private hands, right? In families' hands. And there's a lot of wealth here. I mean, of course, when we talk about well-being, we want to bring up the whole of society. I remember when I was a kid, and I lived in Happy Valley with my parents, and there was a family that delivered the newspapers. And they have two kids about my age. And they would wait for me to come home from school to play. They didn't go to school because they couldn't go to school in those days, right? I thought they were lucky.
They were the unfortunate one.
I mean, to be honest, I've thought about them occasionally, and I just wondered where they are, what happened to them, because they didn't go to school. But anyway, that's part of Hong Kong. I had an ama who brought me up. She became a millionaire, after she left us, right? So what I'm saying is people do incredible things. And I just feel, I mean, I have a lot of friends in Hong Kong. I kind of get my fingers into lots of different pies, different industries. There's a lot of energetic people here. We're far from dead.
Well, Hong Kong used to be, we still have a big metropolis. And for those who are first time in Hong Kong, many said this kind of magic and energy in Hong Kong, just really sort of like a magnet draws them in. Do you see that kind of energy level is subduing a little bit?
I think it depends on who you talk to, right? And I'm just talking about in the last month, right? But we have had people coming back to Hong Kong for visits, or we've had new people coming in. I had two people come from Copenhagen, and they were shipping people, and one of the shipping companies had a box in rugby sevens, and invited them, right? And I said, you got to go. They said, why would we want to go and watch rugby? I said, no, you're coming to see a bit of Hong Kong culture. Go. They were completely overwhelmed. They couldn't imagine anything happening like that. So again, that was an incredibly positive message. I have other friends who come and say, well, the town is so empty. Over the weekend, there doesn't seem to be anybody here. And some people would have said to them, they all went up to Shenzhen. Now, is that a good or bad sign for a visitor? It's hard to say. So I guess it depends on how people interpret what they see and they hear. But I live here. I work, I have university life. I have different industries that I deal with, young people, older people, my parents' friends. My parents are still alive. I think in general, Hong Kong is quite okay.
Yeah, I'm also on that path. I'm also more than optimist than the pessimist. You also mentioned about, as an international city, people do come and go, which is quite natural. Hong Kong population now 7.5 or 7.6 has gone up to be, in terms of number, actually just before even a little bit more than before COVID. People come and go, but that's in terms of number. But in terms of the individual, are we having the same sort of replacement come and go? You lost a lot of IT people, financier who gone to Dubai or other parts. But do we getting the same sort of, in terms of the content, in terms of I shouldn't use quality because people shouldn't be compared on quality. But in terms of the need of these in driving Hong Kong development, are we getting these right people to come here?
You know, just look at who came to Hong Kong all these years. They swam over, they climbed the mountain, they were refugees. I mean, my God, right? But as a totality, I guess people who are willing to move around, including Hong Kong people who are willing to go into new areas, you know, the Middle East and countries that they've never been to do business. I mean, these people have some spirit, right? They're willing to take risk. So Hong Kong has a pretty good size of these people over time. You know, I kind of think must be okay. I mean, you know, it's the, what do you call them, right? This is just a group of people, and you'd get your, you know, how do we talk about people being more or less talented? It's kind of hard to say, because I get asked by people who are doing humanities at universities, do we have a future? Because we're not doing STEM. And, right, you know, and I say to them, no, definitely, because the STEM people cannot talk to anyone. We need you guys to actually interpret and explain to the world what people should understand. You know, so work together. What we need to do is be able to have basic understanding of certain things and be able to communicate and co-create. And, you know, the humanities is as creative as the scientific innovation. That's why I think it's really important for young people to have a good balance of, you know, different types of skills.
Yeah, I think back to our ancient China Confucius teaching, we need to learn 6 things. So you need to study, you need to have the virtues, you need to have good physical exercise. All these things actually not just science or humanities, this is a sort of complete the whole eco cycle of learning of these 6 things to make you a more complete person. It seems that we are now, like everything in the world, polarized. It's like this or that. If you don't do this and that, it's not that. So maybe a little bit of balancing would help.
You mean Hong Kong people balancing ourselves? Oh, we are very highly strung. Generally, yes, that's why we can buzz around and have 5 or 6 meetings a day, right? Yeah, but you know.
Yeah, Christine was very active in the last few days. We did the HSBC summit and moderated, and she also participated in another panel. So very busy time of having Christine. So we are lucky to have her here today, which we booked her long time ago when she was not really that busy at that time. But I can't let you go without asking you about the ESG, sustainability, environment. You don't seem to have covered much in your 30 minutes presentation. You are a guru in that area. Why do you want to shy away from the subject?
I'm not shying away. I mean, ESG is just a reporting and disclosure system. You know, it's something that we can all learn, and the world is going towards actually a sustainability revolution, right? So businesses all have to change, and ESG is one of those tools that requires people to start looking at their environmental and social performance. So that's why I think unless people wanted a deep dive into ESG, I think ESG is only one of many things.
Mm-hmm. Just one of the many things about
that people have to kind of get into, right? Because there's a revolution. There's a sustainability revolution going on. Sorry?
The furtherance of the knowledge of the factors of ESG, can the government help? Is the government doing enough?
One thing that the government has done that is important is that the regulators, this is the banking regulator and the Securities and Futures Commission, they have required banks and listed companies to do ESG reporting. And since it's mandatory, they're going to have to do it. And this is actually kind of thundering out, you know, to all these companies. And because the regulators have said that they will follow one of the international standards called ISSB, and that will come into play by 2026. It means that companies that are doing businesses with the listed companies, and many of these are SMEs, they're going to be asked by their customers, right? Their big customers, as well as their banks, to disclose information. So I know for a fact that many of those companies that are already being asked, the SMEs, are actually saying, oh God, what do I have to do? And at HKUST, we've created a little calculator for them. The thing that I want the government to do is, actually the regulators ask us to create a calculator for the SME. So we've actually done it. The issue is, who is going to put it out there for the people, for the SMEs to use? I see that as a public sector role. And again, one of the problems that we have in government is there isn't a particular department that is directly responsible. So this thing is kind of like just sitting there. But maybe this is something the General Chamber can do, because you have many SME members. Would be very pleased to see, working with the SFC and others, how to kind of reach out to your membership to at least tell them that this thing is available. And I guarantee you, they can do it in 10 minutes. We have designed it in such a way that actually we've gone to like 60 or 70 SMEs. They've all told us we can do it, right? We show them that, okay, I can do it in 10 minutes. The question is, will they do it? Not whether they can do it. But that takes, some community pushing. So the government has an important role.
Okay, talk about the government and then the education, etc. You were previously with the government on the environmental side. You must have some comments on this waste, solid waste charging scheme. Was it your fault not to make that happen during your time?
Well, I tell you what I learned. I was the one who, working with my colleagues, wrote the first waste management blueprint in 2013. Actually, during C.H. Tong's time, there was another document, right? But most of the things, unfortunately, didn't get done yet. So by the time we got into government, we felt that, there has to be a bigger push. And so we wrote another blueprint. And there, I did look at what other cities did, right? And I looked at Seoul and I looked at Taipei. And then since I left office, I had the benefit of looking at Shanghai in 2019. It's all the same story. So when the government says, okay, we're going to make you do something different, everybody says, no, we don't want to do it. We can't do it. And I was shown a picture by the official who visited Hong Kong. He was the one that under Ma Ying-jeou in Taipei, he was the one who was in charge of getting it done. So he showed me this photograph. There was a guy standing there, and there were a group of people standing there going like that at him. And he said, that was me. He says, when we rolled this out, when we said we were going to do it, everybody was shouting at me that you can't do it. Well, when you roll it out, it does take time, because you're getting, hundreds and thousands of people. In Hong Kong, 9 million people, right? We're going to bother 9 million people to act and behave differently. So, of course, it's complicated. So I think it's one of those things where you learn, you smooth out, you adapt by doing, not by just handing out pamphlets, right? So you need to put the people in some kind of mood to say, I'm not going to penalize you, but this is a community thing. We need to get into doing this all together, have a decent period to show us how to do it, try and improve as you go along, and just get it done. Other cities have done it. I do not think Hong Kong people can't do it.
Would the government do it? Would the government instigate that?
Well, they're trying to do it now. They have a...
You see what have developed.
They have a trial period, I mean, they're going to have to show us how it's going to be done.
Great. I think at this juncture, it's good for me to open the floor so that the audience will ask Christine a couple of interesting questions. Over there, yeah.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks very much. Actually, I was going to ask you about the environment, but not exactly ESG a little bit. First of all, it was Matt Monroe for Love is a Many Splendored thing, also Andy Williams for the song. And Singapore's population is still not recovering, at least as of 2022. I'm not sure about 2023. Just an update. But in terms of the environment, beyond that, and of course the waste charging scheme, we have an example. And as you said, there are other cities, Tokyo included, that have that have done this pretty well and have moved upwards. But I teach at CUHK, and my students are mostly mainlanders, and I teach about economic and trade and financial policies and other things, and they do presentations. And every year, including this year, there's always at least one group that does green finance and its connection with the low carbon economy. However, those are almost always mainlanders and not Hong Kongers. And I know it's a small sample, but is there support in Hong Kong for not just the waste charging scheme? Is there enough for that? Is it enough of a priority? It's a priority for especially young people and others elsewhere. Is it in Hong Kong, or has that changed over the years? You've been involved with this for a long, long time and have contributed to moving this forward. But what's your feeling? Not just the reaction, but it's not so untypical in terms of priorities. Doesn't still seem to be a very high priority.
In the last month, as you know, Hong Kong has had all kinds of conferences and summits, right? So we've had green tech, green finance, green earth, right? You know, they're all kind of coming. And some of them had a heavy mainland component. And in each one of them, because I think I went to, well, at least all the ones I went to, and there were quite a few, there were very clear indications from mainland speakers that they look at Hong Kong as a financial center. They want Hong Kong to play some kind of role in carbon trading, carbon pricing. But I think over more than 10 years, they've seen no action from Hong Kong. Now, carbon trading on a voluntary scale, you can do something, but what is the regulatory backing behind it? Because it's a product in the end, right? The government as yet has taken no view after all this time, even though I think they should have. I suspect part of it is fear. Part of it is maybe somebody somewhere decides that, they don't believe in it. I think all of these things may have played into the non-decision. But I do think we've come to a stage where, Mainland is making it quite explicit. If you're not going to do it, we'll go somewhere else. However, I'm not entirely sure that the leaders of our financial services in government truly gets it yet. Now, they might, I guess, ask someone like, the Financial Development Services, FSDC, right? I think they're doing some study now. But it is something they need to grasp and understand what role Hong Kong can play. And there are lots of people to help them, by the way.
A lot of consultants, other things.
Yes.
Yes, you've got Mr. Wong there.
Hi, Christine. I'm Michael Wong from Oxfam. Great presentation. I really enjoyed it. And your topic is around the future. So obviously, our children and the young people are our future. What troubles me a lot, because I do a lot with young people in my other activities, not professionally, but in scouting, is that the young people, the entire generation from 15 to about 30 years old, they have a very disillusioned view of Hong Kong. They see Hong Kong as being a place where they do not have a good lifestyle because of lack of opportunities. They feel suppressed by whatever political perceptions that they have, and so on. And I know that government is trying to do a lot. There's a lot of tours that goes to China and so on to try to convince the kids and the young people that, we are in a great state of, we are in a great situation. But I'm not sure if that is working. And I would like to get your viewpoint on how we should do it to build up this sense of pride amongst the young people. Because if you go to the US, they say, I love to be American, I'm a proud American, or I'm a proud Canadian. But you hardly hear a person say, I'm a proud Hong Konger, especially amongst the young. So I'd like to hear your view on that. Thank you.
I think the difficulty for us is, the bit about identity. And, you've seen research, right? How do people see themselves? I think until one day, the young people, if they can say, I'm a proud Chinese, it'll be hard for them to kind of place themselves Hong Kong versus China. I don't know what it would take for them to do so. Now, the bit about opportunity is, as kids grow up, if you've not been exposed to how many types of jobs there are in different sectors, maybe you're looking at certain things very narrowly. And traditionally, I think in Hong Kong, you want to be a lawyer or a doctor, or maybe in the past an engineer, but even an engineer wasn't so cool anymore if you could go into investment banking, right? So I think some of the mistakes that we've made is we, at one time, and I did talk to people in government and in business, where they think making things was no longer important. It was all about milking what people make and make money from it, right? That capital was more important than everything else. So I think if we look at the world today, this is beginning to change. Even in the US, they now say we need to make things here. So China is, of course, the factory for the world. The Chinese know how to make things. So, I mean, in terms of our young people, if we continue to associate making things with low-end jobs, when actually it isn't anymore, then maybe they feel there's a very narrow group of jobs, either they're in it or they're not in it. And this entrepreneurial spirit of, well, if you believe in something, you're gonna keep working on it until you find a path forward, right? And you're going to have to suck it up, so to speak, by not earning a lot of money at the start. This is something that we see young people elsewhere doing that, and I think in Hong Kong too, that way of looking at what I want to do, what I want to invest in, and our parents to say it's okay to be an artist, it's okay. And I also think something about Hong Kong where, Hong Kong people actually have spent generations learning music, but they never think they could be a musician. And if we look at how many even very wealthy people actually go off and jam, right? And actually a lot of very big tycoons, they like to dance. There are dancing schools. I mean, Hong Kong is this amazing place, but no parent will tell you you can do this professionally. However, I think we might have come to a time where we can say, well, actually, yes. Yes, and how do we create the conditions in Hong Kong to support some of these things? That will make us a greater city, rather than we just go learn music, we love music, but we never think we can make a life in music.
I mean, that's good, because under the 8th center that's been given for Hong Kong to develop by our motherland is the best of East and West arts and culture, which Hong Kong never really been focused, despite we have arts festival for over 45 years. We have any magnificent musicians that are international acclaimed standard, won a lot of prizes. The success of Hong Kong based on the financial asset and all that overshadowed all the needs and development to diversify and grow Hong Kong into even more attractive metropolis. So this is one of the key centers of Hong Kong, and with the really magnificent infrastructural development of the M+, the West Kowloon cultural area, plus the museum, I think the focus of these younger generations into developing a career into that will be much more well received, not only by parents, but in terms of the better development into the future would definitely be the case.
Well, I also want to tell a short little anecdote. I went to Art Basel, the big one and the small one, right? The Art Central. I went there with a local collector, and she wanted to show me all the Hong Kong artists she is now investing in, right? So, and you look at their art, these are Hong Kong, right? Hong Kong younger artists, they're good. So maybe the impression also is, we all live in a fairly narrow world because we only have so much time. But if we step into somebody else's world and go and look at some of these things, maybe we suddenly realize, well, actually, our young people have arrived. So how can we create more condition for them so that they can, spend their lives doing something at a high quality? But they are already there. So, but, how do we talk about some of these things so that we can support more of those activities?
I think I still have time to entertain one question from the floor that you already got.
I want to add a quick addendum to the growth of Hong as an expanded multifaceted city. It started with Dong Chi-Wang. 2003, he founded the Cultural and Heritage Commission. Went up and down with the colonial successes, it did not materialize. We have West Kowloon. It's a long time, to mature, but the foundations are there. And we have to all participate in making it grow. As Hong Kong, as a metropolis, in multifaceted, in one aspect we're integrated. We have to be a metropolis in all sorts of development.
Thank you very much. Would there be any other questions from the floor? Let us anything one more before we.
Hi, thank you, Christine, for your presentation. I'm a university student from HKUST,
Okay.
studying green finance.
Glad you
Your
come.
student.
Yes.
Yeah, studying green finance, and I want to ask this question on top of my colleagues: that what kind of changes should we expect from the green financing role, and what kind of opportunities that students should look out, and your thoughts on the future of green finance as well in Hong Kong, especially.
Well, maybe I can share with you some of the discussions that took place yesterday at the HSBC Summit and also the week before at the One Earth Summit, because it has to do with green finance and it has to do with the role of Hong Kong. So the government wants Hong Kong to be a green finance center, and the financial secretary would usually come up with a number of examples like Hong Kong, how many green bonds we have done. But the real kind of discussions about going forward in the future is how do we make financial centers, of which Hong Kong is one, how do we get financial centers to be able to put together large sums of money for greener activities? And as a financial center, how important it is for intellectual discussion to take place about how, why, and whatnot, right? To actually think through this. So we talked about, let's say, example, right? We know today China has a glut of solar panels, very cheap. We know these solar panels could be used, deployed, right? Deployed massively at speed and at scale in different parts of the world, because developing economies need energy to develop. No energy, no talk, by the way, right? So energy is really important. What are the financial packages that public and private capital can work together on so that these kinds of examples could be really deployed very quickly and at scale around the world, right? What is the rate of return that a private capital supplier might want? How do you help to de-risk that with multilateral banks? What I'm saying is people are kind of already there, but how can we provide a platform for both the intellectual development of what we can do and to have the players in Hong Kong, which we have, to actually go do it? So I would say that at the universities, we can play a role by providing that platform to have these discussions. Our business schools in the past, I think, have been very practical. 有冇錢搵啊? Can you make money? But today, because we have a revolution in trying to change the world to become sustainable, there is a lot of deeper thinking that has to go into it. We have the institutions to do it. We want young people like yourself to precisely say, well, how can I help the poorer part of the world to a just transition, right? So it's not just for us that can pay for certain things, but it's for them who don't have the energy to turn the lights on so their children can study at night. How can I, as a financier, help them to have that energy so that they too can grow and I can make some money at the same time?
Well, that will give us a great way to conclude these sessions, make some money for everyone providing the platform, and we all love that. Thank you for joining me, and thanks to Christine for her very insightful look into what Hong Kong has been going through. and more important is the future. And the positive messages is okay that Christine have passed on to us. I hope this okay will eventually become bigger, bigger, bigger okay. And please join me to give Christine a big round of applause for this.
Buying movie tickets,
Economics.
going to restaurants.
The big question mark is the GVA going to do exactly the same thing.
Yeah.